Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Meehan. I run the pre-sales solutions engineering team at Kentik.
Also started an ISP?
I did. I ran a dial-up ISP in the Chicago suburbs in the mid-90s. I hope you won't mind if I take a seat for the demo portion. It will be difficult to drive a demo standing up. I'll cover a little bit of background that kind of starts where Avi left off. The screen we're looking at now is the web UI for the Kentik platform. To set the stage just a little bit, the thing that is the really big differentiator for us is that we retain and store all of the raw data at the resolution that the network device sends us. And that's as opposed to just about everything, every commercial product that's looked or analyzed flow in the past, which takes a kind of aggregated ingest type of approach. So they roll up flows, they discard the original data, because you just don't have enough disk and CPU in an appliance-based architecture to keep all the raw data. What that enables for us is both the type of summary reports that traditional appliances give you, but also the ability to pivot the data, to drill down, to filter on any narrow piece of data, to really get to the bottom of it, or to the top of it, so to speak. What I've started off in is a dashboard, and the dashboards are a common entry point into Kentik for many of our customers. Everything that you see on this dashboard is produced on the fly from all of the raw flow data. And dashboards can be kind of general purpose visibility into the network. So you might have an overview dashboard. You might have dashboards that you use for investigating certain types of incidents. You might have dashboards that are useful for different groups or organizations in the company. So we have some dashboards that come out of the box, and we call those presets. And these are dashboards that we think are generally useful across lots of different types of networks.
Is that resolution okay, or do you want us? Does anyone?
You can make it bigger, yeah.
Well, smaller fonts would be nice. Yeah. Thank you.
But of course, you can compose your own dashboards as well, and some of those could be visible to everyone in the organization, or you could have dashboards that are visible only to your personal login. So the one that we were looking at just a second ago is a basic top talkers, top flows type of dashboard, kind of globally across the network. And you can see we allow different types of visualizations. I can change the visualization type for any of these. So if I want, instead of a pie chart for that panel, a stacked graph, I can just switch the visualization type and now see traffic per source over time. Some of the other types of visualizations are Sankey flow diagrams, which really help you understand the relationships between the different dimensions. So aside from just top source and dest IPs, we've also added in source ports, dest ports, that kind of thing. And then matrix visualizations as well. So now we've got sources as rows, dests as columns, and the traffic volume for each source dest pair in each of the cells with kind of a heat map type of presentation. There's an ability to filter the dashboard on the left here. So if I wanted to have this dashboard reflect some specific piece of the network, like maybe I want this dashboard just to look at traffic that went to Google's public DNS resolver, I could add in a filter for traffic to a specific destination, and now everything on the dashboard is filtered the same way. So we can see that didn't update the way I was hoping it would. We can see the filters reflected in all of the different panels on the dashboard. I can also use dashboards as kind of a scheduled reporting base as well. So any particular dashboard, I can add a subscription, pick the dashboard I want to send out, put in a list of email addresses and a schedule, and the contents of that dashboard will get packaged up and delivered as a PDF on the scheduled basis. From the dashboard, you can also drill into any of those panels to get kind of a deep dive. So if I saw something that warranted investigation in the source IP pie chart, I can click the little arrow there and open it up in the Data Explorer. The Data Explorer is, I would say, the meat of the product, and it has sort of a dual purpose. One is as a tool to compose dashboards. So this is where I'm going to build the queries that become dashboard panels. But it is also a very powerful ad hoc investigative tool. So the left panel has all of the controls that are defining the filters, what's going to be included in the output. The right side is the output, both a visualization and a table.
Can I drill down on the donut?
You can, yeah. So if I, let's say I wanted to investigate that IP, the top talker there, we're looking at sources right now. I could say, show me that one source by destination.
Okay, so I have to go to the bottom screen to do that. I can't do that directly from the top.
From the graph itself? Right. I think that is on our roadmap, actually, to be able to click on the visualization and drill in.
Right now.
But for the moment, it's from the table.
Okay. So the bottom reflects all the data that's up on the top then?
That's right.
Okay.
There's a question. Can you get AS numbers if I'm not running BGP? So can you connect to external data sources on your own, do the lookups, geolocation, all sorts?
We do, yes. We have a built-in BGP database that comes from a public source. So at least for origin and destination ASN, we have accurate
Yeah, of
mappings.
course. You can't give me neighbor AS if I don't tell you
Right.
that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we have a geo database loaded in. In fact, it's on the roadmap. Very shortly, people will be able to override that, because you may have zip code data and other data for your network or your customers. It's better.
Is there some consolidation of public looking glasses so you could have not only view of particular IS but more generalized view?
Yes. So that's also something we're looking at, is being able to take live, because we really want it live, not delayed.
It is live. Yes.
But so not just the delayed data, but yeah, we could do that, and we do have one customer that wants that to mix from public sources. And then the issue is multi-origin gets interesting, which is also showing that can be interesting. But that's the internet, right?
Yes.
The other question, this is probably NetFlow that someone is sending to you.
Yeah.
Can I send you HTTP logs and get the same results?
In alpha right now, we actually have Nginx logs, an Nginx plugin. And the reason that's particularly interesting is because, and actually Fastly logs, which are related, so CDN logs also. The reason that's particularly interesting is because Nginx can peer into the TCP info struct in the kernel and super efficiently get the performance of every transaction. So our agent will do PCAP, and we use nprobe. Many great networking things come out of Italy. So we use nprobe. We have our own agent, but then you're having to track TCP sequence numbers and all that, but the kernel already knows it. And ditto, we can pull the cert from a encrypted stream, but so we'll show you that. That's actually the part I get to do, is the demo of the NPM.
So you can actually show me the performance of my web server by source AS number.
By source AS number, by entire path, by communities, if you have communities, any of those things, or the dimensions that Jim will show you.
Yeah, we have a number of customers doing that already, not from the logs, but by instrumenting their front ends with an agent that inspects packets and produces flow-like data that's annotated with performance. So AppNexus is one of our big public customers that does this pervasively on their network, and they have that level of visibility, right? Performance by ASN, and then they make routing decisions on the basis of that.
Have you looked into supporting BMP?
I think we've investigated it. We haven't had a lot of customer demand for it, so it isn't a near-term roadmap item, but we understand what's possible. And
Great.
So in terms of controls, I can, of course, use the output to kind of drill down. So if I wanted to investigate that top talker source IP, I can pivot on it, which opens that row up in a dashboard. Why is my
Oop, V3 bug?
Yep. I think
Okay,
so.
we'll go to V2 and show the pivot at some point.
Yep. I can show that by destination IP. No, I don't think it's a.
Oh, you think it's a
It seems like a web browser
browser being
problem.
strange?
Yep.
I put Firefox on there also.
Let me try this one more
Blame
time.
it on the
There's a
network.
question from Twitter. Do you use an on-prem appliance or do you use exported NetFlow data to the cloud? Do you have options?
We have both options. So I would say 98% of our customer base uses our public cloud platform, and they either send their flows over the internet directly using an encrypting proxy agent that can be deployed within their network, which just receives the flows and then proxies them to us over HTTPS. Or some customers cross-connect with us via PNI or on a public exchange. We have a handful of customers. They tend to be large carriers where we've deployed in an on-premise, dedicated hardware within their network. And then we have another few customers that are deployed on single-tenant infrastructure within our facility. So one of the things I want to call attention to is all of the different ways that we can view the data. So both for grouping the output and in terms of filters, I have available not only all of the fields that are available in the flows themselves, things like source and dest IPs, ports, protocols, physical interfaces, but then all of the other fields that we add on to the flow records as they're collected. So every time we receive a flow record, we look up both the source and dest IP in the BGP table. We tag the flow with the next hop, ASN, ASPath, BGP communities that are active at the time that flow was received. So even if the BGP data changes later, the flow is tagged with what was current at the time it was received. The same with geolocation data, the same with what we call custom dimensions, which I can show you in a second, and that's a way to overlay your own business data onto the flows. And then what we saw some of our customers doing with custom dimensions, we saw some things over and over again. So a lot of customers were using custom dimensions to import threat data and tag flows with IP reputation or to tag flows with CDN attribution. So then we went back and made those dimensions kind of built-in first-class citizens so our customers didn't have to provision them as custom dimensions. So I can select one or more dimensions to group by. If I pick a single dimension, then I can get a pie chart or stacked graph, those sorts of things. But I can pick up to 8 dimensions to group by. And so if I pick both source and dest IP, now rather than sources or dests individually, each row represents a unique source-dest pair, so a top-talker pair, if you will. And I can keep adding additional dimensions. So maybe aside from just source and dest, I want to see the source and dest port and protocol. I can add those in. And now I've got output with 4 dimensions in it. So now I can see essentially top flows, not just top conversation pairs. When I have multiple dimensions selected, one of the most useful visualizations is the flow diagram that we saw before. And this really makes it easy to understand the relationships between the dimensions that are selected. So I can see I've got one big destination. It's got 5 sources talking to it. And I can see what ports and protocols those sources are using. So in terms of troubleshooting, drilling down, one of the really big drivers of value for our customer base is dramatically shortening the amount of time that it takes to discover and resolve the 10 or 100 different network mysteries that occur over the course of the day when you're operating a big network. In the past, either you just didn't have access to this level of detail, and so you were logging into routers and dumping out packets and that sort of thing, or it took a long time to get this type of analysis. Maybe you're waiting multiple minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes for your output to produce a result, only to find that, oh wait, I need to add another filter, or I didn't include the dimension that I really needed to answer the question. So it's this sort of iterative drill down process that makes this super useful for network operations, troubleshooting. That could be malicious activity. It could be plain old congestion. It could be any other misconfiguration. Whatever type of things happen in your network on a day-to-day basis. If I get output that is useful that other people need to see, it's easy to share. The easiest way is just to copy the URL out of the browser and paste it in chat or an email. When another user opens that URL, they'll get this same display, same filter, same group bys, same visualization. I can also save it as a saved view, so I can give it a name if this is something I want to recall on a regular basis. We talked about dashboards before. It's easy to add any visualization to a dashboard, and then I can have a bunch of different things sort of side by side on the same page. I can export it as a PDF, an image. I can export the table data as a CSV. And then I can also pull out any of these results via API. So I can get the API call right here from the UI for the chart. So here I have it in curl syntax, or there's a way to get it in formatted JSON as well. And if I hit the API with that API call, I'll get the same thing that I saw in the UI. And the API will hand you back a pre-built image. So it's really easy to embed visualizations from Kentik in other, if you have like a multi-purpose dashboard in your organization that combines data from multiple tools, it's really easy to embed Kentik visualizations on it.
So adding this to a Slack bot is like a 5-minute exercise.
That's right. And we have a number of customers who have done that already.
That's cool.
Then one level deeper than the API, our backend, we actually present it as if it were a giant, extremely performant SQL relational database of all of your flows, using something called foreign data wrappers for Postgres. And this is a feature that allows Postgres to accept and parse SQL syntax queries, but then get the data from some external source. So our backend looks like a sharded, distributed column store database. But because of this Postgres foreign data wrappers feature, it looks like a SQL database. And that makes it a lot easier for our front-end developers to interact with, but also for our end users to interact with directly. So I can see the SQL query that the graph and the chart were constructed from. I can run it and see the same output that the graph and the table were built from. I can edit it. I can run queries from scratch. So I could say something like, get rid of everything here. Show me all of the columns from the flow tables for all my routers where I collected the flow in the last 10 seconds, and it was a UDP flow, and I want to see the first 10. And so now I can see,
Whoops.
oh, yep, an output problem there with a lot of columns. We just released this UI in beta. It is a little fancier than our old UI, but it still has some a couple of rough edges.
So you're effectively using Postgres as a SQL proxy to your data structure.
Yes.
We have the next presentation is on the back end and how we do that.
Why are you guys so cool?
Because we're nerds.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I think the answer is that there's not so many product companies built by practitioners.
I can agree with that.
So I mentioned custom dimensions, and in an admin menu here.
Could you make that a little bigger?
Yeah. You can see in this demo account, we have 10 different custom dimensions built. And this is how we overlay business-specific or customer-specific data onto flows. So one I want to call out here is customer ID, and this might be useful in a service provider context where I've got N number of customers that I sell ports or transit or whatever to. Within this custom dimension, we have something called populators. And these are all of my customer names here. And within the customer name, I have matches. So what we're saying basically is anytime I see a flow that is to or from that IP address, in my customer ID dimension, I'm going to stick this value. And then that dimension becomes something that I can group or filter by just like any other dimension in the Data Explorer. So I could say group by customer ID. And now my output is all of the different.
Tell them, get in touch with them.
I clicked. Again there. So now all of my rows. Oh, I picked the wrong visualization. Let's go back to a stack graph. So now all of my rows are those customer ID values. I can drill down on them just like any other.
And we do support ISO codes, as you see. So.
Yes. So one of the big purposes of custom dimensions is to make this data set more accessible for users in the organization who aren't going to be familiar with the IP space and how it's allocated, or they just want to ask a question about that server group or that customer or that service name, and they don't know what ports or IPs are associated with it. So some of the common things we see custom dimensions being used for are physical locations. Let's say you're a large enterprise and you've got offices all over the place. You want to map traffic data to an office or a branch location. Server groups in a web-facing online enterprise, they want to see web versus mail versus voice versus video.
Can I use a RegX?
Sorry, say again?
Regular expression to filter out?
We do support RegX matching most places in the product, so especially if I just add filters, but also in the custom dimensions as well, yes.
Yeah.
I'll cover filters just a little bit. So I showed a little bit of that already, but any of those same dimensions that I can group by, I can also filter on. So if I'm looking at, let's say source IPs, I can plug in, not just an individual IP, but I could also plug in, let's say a /8. And this is where things start to get difficult when you are using, some generic big data backend. If I want to filter on a subnet with / notation, it's not going to understand how to aggregate that, or there's a lot of stuff you have to build around the edges if you're going to try and do this yourself. So having a database backend, a web UI that understands the types of constructs that network operators are going to want to filter by, group by, that's a lot of the hard part that went into making this useful. I can also group by, so I could filter on a /8 and then group by /24s. So it provides it a nice way to roll up the traffic data that way. So I'll turn it back over to Avi for the discussion about our backend. Any quick questions before we?
Yeah, I think I know the answer, but just in case, do you support IPv6?
We do support IPv6, yes.
Yeah, so universally across the product, and generally when people are looking at prefix length, we actually let you specify the v4 prefix length and the v6 prefix length that you want. Some people's 64s or some people's 128s, and some people are around for how IPv6 got so wonderful, and some people were not, but the rest of us just live with it.
Do you understand other encapsulations than IP? MPLS comes to mind.
Do we, I'm sorry?
Do you understand MPLS?
If we get the tags, yes. So if MPLS is, if the device that we get the traffic data from, the flow data from, populates the tags as IPFix or v9 templates, then yes, then we can do that.
For a long time, there's been sort of a chicken and egg problem with Flow and MPLS. The router vendors had a lot of bugs in how MPLS Flow was implemented. They didn't reliably communicate those fields, and Flow vendors hadn't implemented it yet because there was no good data source, right, with all the bugs. I think that's just now starting to change, that Cisco and Juniper both have Flow data that reasonably exports MPLS data. There's still challenges to be solved because if you get a Flow record that says the MPLS tag ID was this, you're still going to want to map that to something that's human readable, right? If I broke out all my MPLS flows by tag IDs, not particularly meaningful in a...
Are you capable of looking at control plane, like TDB, LSDB?
Not today, no. That's a request that a lot of our customers, that we hear.
You need context when you're doing
Yeah,
PLS.
exactly. And what we've done in the meantime, because most of our customers are running, and we also don't look at IGPs other than BGP as an IGP, because most of our customers are doing data center work or either using magic tunnel stuff, in which case, we just connect that. But we can see that with SFlow, you can actually, see a CVPN, information, or it's IBGP, and we can see that. And on the WAN, it's generally BGP, so we can project that. That's what our ultimate exit is. We can project how it's going to move across. But when you get into people running services on top of a converged MPLS backbone, then there's people that want to be able to look at that without having to share that with us. The other thing I'll say, which is a gotcha, is that people that engage in over creative use of VRFs can be difficult, because what routing table do you apply? If every interface, it's sort of like when Cisco came out with Ceph, we called it the customer enragement feature, because it was a non-deterministic routing engine where you could have bugs where a packet had to come in one way and go, to go out the other way, or you wouldn't even be able to debug.
Ceph inconsistencies were my favorite bugs.
Yes, Ceph inconsistency. What was it called? Cisco Express Forwarding, and we called it the customer enragement feature. So we love Cisco and Juniper and all router
Okay,
vendors.
now that you mentioned MPLS and VERS,
Yes.
can you use this for monitoring layer 3 VPNs? So for example, could you use the MPLS tag to identify the customer and then split the traffic by customer?
Yeah, I think we don't have a populator for MPLS tag, but that'd be very easy to do. The challenge is not all devices can actually, export that well, but yeah, that certainly could be done. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you don't have to tag customers by IP. We have people, again...
They have overlapping space.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's natted sometimes, right,
Yeah.
you may have very temporary mappings. But you can tag by BGP community, by anything that becomes a column, you can then tag on. This Kentik Slack channel said the reason pivot didn't work maybe was because of pop-up blockers. So I think I fixed that. So if I did want to, often when you are looking, you don't know what you're looking for. If I did want to select anything, any piece of data, and then do pivot, and marketing-wise, I now like this better. Initially, we called it explode, and we didn't really want to be exploded. So, why? It's like, we will wait. We're going to do all this effort. Let's wait until we come up with a good name for it. And so then we focused in. That thing became a filter. So the source IP, we're filtering on 8.8.8.0/24. And then we have a dashboard that you can define, which is the I don't know, but there's some spike that I want to drill into dashboard. And then we just look at packets per second and bits per second and matrix, a bunch of different visualizations by AS and interface. So you can sort of see, well, where was that spike? I should drill in on an actual spike, so we could do that.